Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where you can find all of your basic guides on Total War games. Today we are looking at each individual unit's role of the Chaos faction. The Chaos armies primarily consists of melee infantry fighting alongside huge mutated monsters. They are mainly a melee focused faction, meaning their main playstyle revolves around winning their frontline engagements with just their infantry and maybe some monstrous units. Timestamps can be found in the description if you would like to skip to a particular portion of the video. The Chaos Lord is a generic fighter lord. It is usually overshadowed by the Legendary Lords or the Sorcerer Lords. It can be put onto a flying terror-causing mount, being a Manticore or a Chaos Dragon. His abilities are standard but adequate for dueling other lords or buffing nearby troops defensively. There are 4 different Sorcerer Lords, each having access to a different lore of magic, that being the lore of Shadow, Metal, Death, and Fire. You will need to try to keep the Sorcerer Lords away from any other lords and heroes, as he would die very quickly if caught out. The Exalted Hero is a competent duelist character that can put up a good fight even against enemy lords. They can be put on Manticores, which provide the Chaos army with a mobile terror causing character, which is always useful. Generally, the Exalted Hero is best used to protect or to fight alongside the lords in order to maximize damage in the duel with enemy characters or single entity units. As with the Sorcerer Lords, there are also 4 Sorcerer Heroes, each having access to the same lores of magic, being Shadow, Metal, Death, and Fire. Just make sure to keep them away from any melee engagements, as they will not perform well at all. Chaos Marauders are a very cost-efficient melee infantry that are only limited by their low armor. Keep them away from missile fire and charges by monsters in cav, and they should hold your front lines quite decently. They can even put up a decent fight against higher tier infantry as long as they are supported by a lord, hero, or aspiring champions. Chaos Marauders with great weapons are your first armor-piercing option. They are slightly more expensive than the regular Marauders, and they have no shields and lower melee defense. This makes them extremely vulnerable to missile fire and will take a good bit of damage in melee. Aside from that, they are still great for taking out those heavily armored infantry on the battlefield. Aspiring champions are a niche unit on the Chaos roster. They are useful for providing a bit of added support and backbone to the Chaos front line. They are best used along with Marauders and Chaos Warriors. They have strong melee stats and have magic damage. Their Encourage Ura will help keep your front line in the fight, especially if your lord is not nearby. These are best used for bolstering your frontline engagements. Chaos Warriors are your main frontline infantry, and they are above average when compared to standard frontline infantry. The only basic infantry that could best them would probably be the Saurus Warriors. They have solid melee stats, great armor, and a silver shield. Their downsides are that they are very slow and do not have the most armor-piercing damage. The Forsaken are fast and frantic damage dealers. Most Chaos infantry are slow-moving and do not have the most damage capabilities, but the Forsaken are decently fast, allowing them to get around the enemies to flank. They have Frenzy to increase their damage in melee, which is already high. They have decent armor-piercing damage, but not enough to be considered an armor-piercing unit. Forsaken should avoid prolonged combat with heavily armored foes, and should mainly be used to kill light infantry. Their role will be to flank the enemy front lines. Chaos Warriors with great weapons give up their shields and some melee defense for armor-piercing damage. This makes them very effective in fighting heavily armored infantry. These should mainly be used for bolstering portions of your frontline engagements that are heavily armored. If there is a heavily armored large unit, use the halberds instead. Chaos Warriors with halberds are your earliest available and cheapest anti-large infantry. While the Chaos has excellent Cavan monsters for killing other large units, they're expensive and can't quite pin them down as effectively as infantry. Having a few halberds to anchor your flanks and as a reserve can be very helpful on the battlefield. Chosen are above average compared to other elite infantry. They take everything the Chaos Warriors can do and do it better. With 60 melee defense and 46 melee attack, few enemies can beat a Chosen unit one-on-one. They retain the same weaknesses as Chaos Warriors in that they are slow even for infantry and only have some armor-piercing damage. While each model is tougher than Chaos Warriors, they still do have fewer models. Don't let them get hit by high armor-piercing damage spells, artillery, or missile fire that can kill off models fast. Use Chaos Warriors to absorb the damage and deal with the lesser melee opponents, and save your Chosen for the major melee threats. Chosen with halberds are a solid anti-large infantry that can effectively fight any monsters or cav. Their high armor-piercing damage allows them to damage armored infantry effectively, but may struggle to damage infantry with high melee defense as their base melee attack is not that high for their tier. Like all halberds, they lack shield, so they will suffer heavy damage if hit with armor-piercing missiles. Chosen with great weapons are a very expensive elite infantry unit. They have a high health pool and deal large amounts of armor-piercing damage. They will beat most armored infantry in the game. These will be used to be sent after the heavily armored elite infantry on the battlefield. Chaos Chariots are an anti-infantry high-mass shock unit that specializes in breaking through thin lines and crashing into flanks. They are almost entirely dependent on their charge bonus, and while they mow down infantry while in motion, they can easily die if they get stuck. Their weakness is focus fire from armor-piercing missiles or large units with anti-large bonuses. The Gorbey's Chariot is slower but packs a bigger punch than your standard chariot. These will be used when you really want to punish enemy infantry and you have your own infantry that can fend off enemy cav from swarming them. Chaos Knights are heavily armored and shielded. They have decent melee stats and a strong charge bonus. They are a strong all-rounder cav that can engage with almost anything and do decently well. Like all cav, you should avoid anti-large units, and they are also not the best for taking down heavily armored large units themselves. Chaos Knights with lances are the shock cav version of the Chaos Knights. They trade melee defense for a much higher charge bonus and some armor-piercing damage. While regular Chaos Knights can stay in prolonged combat, the lance versions cannot. They need to be cycle-charged as much as possible. They also tend to do better versus other cav due to them securing an early advantage with their first charge damage. Marauder Horsemen are almost an essential high mobility unit for the Chaos. Most Chaos units are slow, so these will be used to screen your flanks by harassing enemy cav and missile units. If your flanks are secured, then you can swing them around to fire into the enemy's backs. The Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes are a very useful unit. They are best used against heavily armored infantry. They should be used in the same way as the Marauder Horsemen, but more priority on hitting the armored targets first. Their biggest downside is their short range. Be wary of enemy missiles as they are the best for punishing this unit. Marauder Horsemasters should be used in the same way as the Marauder Horsemen, as they are just an upgraded version. Chaos Warhounds are used just like every other hound unit. Use them for chasing down ranged infantry, artillery pieces, or routing units off the battlefield. The poison version is the preferred variant on the Chaos roster. The Chaos Warhounds with poison provide the Chaos with the means to deal with the enemy backlines. As we all know, Chaos infantry is extremely slow, so their speed is their main weakness. The Chaos Warhounds give the Chaos mobility to keep up with other factions. These will be used in the same way as the regular Chaos Warhounds. The Chaos Feral Manticore is an underwhelming unit. In most situations, the Manticore will rampage uncontrollably even when at high health. This causes them to fight some units that they should not be fighting, mainly use this unit for disrupting the backline infantry. The Chaos Trolls offer good armor-piercing damage and regeneration, but they will rout very quickly if they are pressed too hard. As with other race versions, they do best when mixed in with infantry to boost their leadership. The Chaos Spawn are an unbreakable high damage dealing unit. They are meant to smash through enemy lines and grind them up. They have decent anti-infantry bonuses, but have minimal armor and no other forms of damage mitigation, so they must be used effectively. These will be mixed in along with your frontline units. The armored Chaos Trolls are the exact same as the standard Trolls, but with higher armor. While this may not seem like a huge difference, it does help out quite a bit. Armored Trolls can often easily break through infantry lines and take less damage than the standard Trolls. The Chaos Giant is very similar to the Norska Giant and Greenskin's Giant. It is effective in killing infantry and even armored infantry with its decent armor-piercing damage. Make sure to keep him fighting amongst the frontline battle and make sure he is always supported by other infantry. The Dragon Ogres are the anti-large mobile unit for the Chaos. They lose speed compared to Cav but gain improved melee stats. Notably, they also have scaly skin for improved missile resistance. They are best used for hunting down large units, but they can most certainly devastate infantry if needed. The Dragon Ogre Shaggoth has very strong melee stats, high armor-piercing damage, and bonus versus large. This unit is made for beating down almost anything that comes at it. The Shaggoth is frequently paired with Kolek or some other large units to provide support should it get surrounded. This unit will be used to support the frontline engagements against large armored units. The Hell Cannon is truly a unique piece of equipment. They only have one cannon per unit, but the projectile is homing and does very high armor-piercing damage and magical damage. Even small flying units will struggle to evade its fire. Each shot is very likely to hit and do significant damage. Any units hit by it will receive leadership penalties, so the more elite infantry should be your primary targets. So that about wraps it up for our Chaos unit roster guide. Hope you found it useful for your Chaos campaigns. You can find my suggestions for early and late game army comps in the video description. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you drop a like. Also, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.